on how to use digital media to do something very specific and different, and to engage meaningfully with new and developing audiences online. So I assume you're there, Rob?
I am, yeah. Hi, everyone.
Over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael. I'm going to start off as well by giving the obligatory cat warning that if I do have scratches in the background or sneezes or anything like that, then please do ignore him. I will scoop him up if he gets too attention diverting. But yeah, thank you very much, Michael. I'm here to talk about exactly that, how smaller teams, individuals, can create focused digital content and yeah, develop online audiences with limited time and resources. It's worth saying those resources as well might be budget, but they might also be our energies, they might be our headspace, we might be working within ceilings of stress levels and so forth. So it's about, yeah, how we can approach things like that sustainably and resiliently. There are times when it can feel like there are an overwhelming number of online opportunities for you to reach audiences or for you to create, to communicate, to inspire. As Michael said, a mountain. It can feel like a never-ending to-do list of things to explore, things to people to reach. So I'm going to start by talking through a few decisions that it can be useful to make. These might be decisions you can make yourself, or they might be internal conversations to be had between you and your team. For those of you who were with us this morning, as Fiona said, it's that kind of audience decision to make. Audiences first. Before you commission, you create and collaborate. It's vital to establish your target audience and make sure that what you are putting out there is going to reach them, making sure it's going to connect with them on the platforms where they already are. Part of this is really good news. It means that you should feel that you have the ability to say no to an online opportunity. You shouldn't automatically feel pressure to go global just because the internet is such. If your target audience is still in your local community, focus on your local community. There are benefits to amplification and to increased reach, but you shouldn't feel that you're just chasing numbers just because they're there. And don't automatically feel pressure to establish a presence on every new platform that starts to gain traction. They won't all be right for you. Your audience, this isn't a one-off transaction. You might be trying to reach people in order to bring them into theatres, bring them to a show, bring them to an event, but I want you to consider what happens if your online activity is fantastically successful. You may sell out your show or diversify an audience. But online, you're building communities, you're building their expectations of your ongoing activity. What happens the day after your goals? You've reached 400,000 people and all those people come back to your website, your social channels, their podcast app or their own email inbox, and they say, great, what else have you got? We've all seen organizations successfully create or curate offerings as audience development exercises only to have zero follow-up. We've seen rock operas and hip hop ballets that gave marketing departments a chance to reach out to new audiences, only for the companies to then go back to the same cycle of classical works that they've performed for 40 years. It's the same trap with digital. Whatever audience you speak to, whatever audience you develop, you need to be serious about maintaining. You need to make sure that you can. Rather than spread yourself thin and try to be all things to all people, please give yourself agency to say no, to say that a particular platform or strand of digital activity is not right for you at this time, especially given resources, again, time, money, energy, headspace. For those of you working as individual artists as well and presenting your own identities online, please also give yourself agency to not maintain a presence on the platforms that you simply don't enjoy. Aside from audience engagement, please acknowledge if you find a platform to be an unrewarding slog and don't beat yourself up if you step away. Do also consider what analytics you're going to get back, what insight, what understanding you're going to get from your online activity. Beyond fantastic responses to audiences, you do want some insight. You want to know what you can draw from it. I think it's quite notable that Snapchat seems to have vanished from many conversations, and I suspect that might be down to the lack of insight and analytics that it offered any but the largest publishers with massive amounts of money to spend. That understanding of audiences just wasn't there. So I think by making these decisions and by allowing yourself to focus, by allowing yourselves to put a few things to one side, hopefully it will reduce that sense of being overwhelmed. But for the platforms that you do identify as appealing, strategically sound places to reach audiences, I want you to ask yourself what you will want to happen once something is published, once something is put out there in front of an audience, because, and I suppose it's worth noting that I'm about to talk about two types of content here: your principal artwork, your kind of main creative pieces, and your supporting content. That supporting content might be something that does support a show, or it might support an online offering, but it might also support the development of your online community, your ongoing presence online, your visibility. But for both, online content is not just an experience that lasts the length of a video or an audio file or the time it takes to read a blog post. It's also an appeal to share, to comment, to like, to amplify, to endorse. And it benefits from a kickstart. Have a real think about what you want to happen next when you publish. Don't just publish online and wait for people to find something. You wouldn't do that for a show. You shouldn't do this even for your teasers and trailers and marketing activity. It doesn't need budget necessarily. It just needs a push similar to what you would do with sort of standard PR practices. Reaching out to supporters, explicitly asking them to share your promotional items, blogs, press, community groups, news sites, art sites. Make sure that you are engaging in the same level of PR support for your online activity as you would do your online. And if you're putting time and energy into making online content and you've not thought about what's going to happen once you've published, then please immediately take time to do so. The things you publish should be there in order to engage with audiences and generate some response. The internet is full of beautiful secrets, beautiful, inspiring, informative, entertaining, uplifting secrets published with the assumption that people would know to look for them. Online content must be approached as if it were an event, an exhibition, a talk, something that people do still need their attention drawn to, even if they're already following you. It's worth talking here a little bit about social content, just as an aside. I think there has been a misconception that a lot of social platforms, Facebook in particular, is only going to show your content to even your own followers if you put paid spend behind it. That's not quite what's happening. This may be familiar to a number of you who are managing social accounts, but there is a vast amount of material going out on all of those platforms, and some of it is fantastic and some of it is quite mundane, and all of those platforms want people to keep coming back to them. They want users to keep coming back, and so what they're doing is they're trying to learn from each and every one of us what is the content that we enjoy and what is the content that we're not interested in. They are aware that we are following lots and lots of people, lots of publishers, lots of organizations, lots of artists, and they are aware that some of that material we really engage with and some of it we don't. But we can't unfollow those people, maybe because we don't want to upset our families that we're going to see at Christmas time or that we're going to see at different events. It might be that you have school friends whose political opinions have diverged from your own over the intervening years. It may be, again, that there are people that you're following that you don't want to mute or unfollow, but the material just isn't particularly interesting to you. And what those platforms are doing algorithmically is they're trying to act as PAs. They're trying to prioritize the material that they believe will engage with the most. They're looking to see who are the friends, the publishers, the organizations who I engage with regularly, and it's prioritizing that material. So if the material we're putting out isn't engaging with people, if it isn't generating shares, if it isn't engaging likes and comments and so on and so forth, then those platforms are going to learn that our content is not as interesting to our audiences. So I would really say that everything that you put out there, it needs that little extra push, that bit of legwork, just to make sure that people engage with it. Yeah, do make sure you're giving your material the best possible chance, and that you know what is going to happen next. Looking again at sustainability, And particularly if you are working with limited resources or you're looking to take up opportunities that have arisen. I wanted to talk a little bit about the language and the approach that you might take to that work. We've had a number of organisations that the space have worked with who have found it really useful to approach things with the language of pilot activity. So research and development without assumed permanent commitment. People are already finding this incredibly useful, setting short-term dates at which point you will stop and reflect and assess. If you're looking to do anything ongoing, do build that in. It could be after 6 episodes of a podcast. Build in time to analyze and only at that point decide whether or not to continue or to evolve or to iterate or to move your attention elsewhere. Has the result justified the resource that you put in? Does the activity need to continue, or maybe you've reached a logical conclusion? Using podcasting again as an example, you may want to experiment with topical content versus evergreen content. Evergreen will allow you to build a rich back catalogue of material for people to discover later down the line, building your audience between new content, whereas topical might allow you to involve yourself in conversations that are happening now. Just make sure you've built in time to reflect and to analyse. And if you do move forward, do so with the benefit of that reflection. You shouldn't just be making content because that's what other people do or that's what you've always done. Likewise, approaching something as R&D might give you the freedom to build in some additional development stages. So again, if I use podcasting as an example, if you're a small team or an individual considering launching your own, you may find you achieve just as much audience reach by appearing on someone else's podcast as a guest, while letting that person worry about the tech, the editing, the publishing, the distribution, the marketing. An R&D stage should allow you to explore these options before committing to what you feel is a kind of fully realized piece of ongoing activity. You should be able to find sustainable options that, if successful, you are able to maintain. Just as a quick aside as well, I mentioned evergreen content. I just want to underline that again. Many of the most successful online publishers, even big media organizations, are building vast back catalogues of material that they can post again and again and again. And it doesn't have to be high-res captures of gigs or performances. It can be very simple interview clips, photos, short videos about your venue or a space. If you can, assess what time-sensitive information you're including in the media that you create and decide if that could be moved into the copy that sits beside it on a page. If you are posting a photo to Instagram to draw attention, can the copy go in the caption rather than the file itself? Because just that simple step means that you can reuse a video without having to re-edit it, or an audio interview without having to re-edit it or recontextualize it. So by this point, you should have made a number of decisions, or you should be seeing that there are a number of decisions that can be made that hopefully make things feel more manageable and avoid that feeling of overwhelmness that so many of us have felt over the last 12 months. And the good news is that when making material, the audience is on our side. While many of us worry about camera quality, audiences still value candidness, interaction, personality, and personalization. I think 12 months ago, an orchestra member would have got into trouble if they went into the pit wearing white socks that caught the light. But over the past year, we've seen people doing gigs in summer shirts in their conservatories. We've seen people doing interviews in their cars. We've seen all number of different things. We've seen a lot of material that is being made with mobile phones, with apps for videos, apps for audio, tripods that can connect to your phone in order to offer a little bit more stability. Again, it's that kind of familiarity. What can you do again and again? What can you keep doing? The Black Country Living Museum here in the Midlands in England gained massive amounts of press attention for an ongoing series of TikTok videos. It is a living museum. They have volunteers there acting out historical characters, and every single thing that they did on their TikTok was done in such a way, was done with that reliability. Audiences knew what to expect. There was a reason to follow that person. You knew what you were going to get, and it could become part of your media diet. Equally, the National Portrait Gallery in London have an Instagram account in which they only post photos of the portraits. And that may seem like a done deal. That may seem like a decision they didn't have to make, but they have vast amounts of other activity. It may be even simply framing processes or installations or any number of things that went on, but they deliberately discipline themselves and say, no, we're just going to do the reliable content that people want. And they do fantastically well for it. And they've learned a great deal. And if you do want to innovate, if you do want to experiment, please do innovate in spaces that people are familiar with. Again, the spaces that they already have the icons for on their phone screen. It can be a really nice way of doing something creatively without needing a huge budget. Dante or Di were mentioned this morning. They made an immersive portrait video for YouTube that, when viewed on your phone, mimicked the desktop of your phone, with different apps being opened and messages used to illustrate a story that a voiceover delivered. The TV show Rick and Morty created a vast series of interconnected Instagram accounts with tags to connect them together and provide a sandbox for people to explore, moving from planet to planet. Again, without having to create any new platform, just using the mechanics that were there. Some people may have been doing this long enough to remember the RSC's Such Tweet Thunder, where a cast of connected Twitter accounts enacted Romeo and Juliet in real time, dutifully ignoring audience members who tweeted, "She's not dead." And more recently, the Tower of London created an interconnected choose your own adventure based on historical events for the tower. All of these used familiar platforms in a different way and took place on those platforms where people already hung out to generate spikes of attention in amongst a solid bedrock of core activity. All of these garnered attention from the press, which was supported with core PR work, of course. And all of those are largely evergreen, allowing their creators to keep benefiting from new audiences encountering them and allowing them to keep talking about these pieces as well. I'm going to draw that to a close, I think, there. As I say, the key takeaways, I would say, are to give yourself permission to focus, give yourself permission to say no. Do go where your audiences are, and do know that they are largely on our side as well. I'm going to point towards 2 resources as well that are on the Space website. There is an Audiences Toolkit, which I'll be talking a little bit more about tomorrow, which again talks about building up your audiences and talks more about some of the techniques that I've explained today. And there's also a Rights Toolkit, which allows me also to segue quite nicely over to Andrea Martin here from Media Lawyers Solicitors, who's going to give some more specific thoughts. Is that okay, Andrea?
Here I am unmuting. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you.
Rob. That was really interesting. And good morning, everybody. My name is Andrea Martin. I'm a media lawyer based in Ireland, and I'd like to start my few comments by saying congratulations and thank you to so many artists who have created such wonderful work online that have heartened the rest of us. And I'm very cognizant of what that costs people and how much genuine suffering there has been in the artistic community as a result of COVID-19. And the opportunities that are opened up by disseminating your work online are exciting. And I think this forum is evidence of that. I'll also say a very quick word about entertainment lawyers, media and entertainment lawyers, those of us who specialize in working with creatives. I've always seen it as a sort of Venn diagram. You know, the 2 bits overlap. And there we media lawyers are somewhere in the middle, because on the one side, you've got business and commerce. And on the other side, you've got creativity and the arts. And if you dig deep with any media lawyer, you'll find that beneath them beats the heart of an aspiring, or at least appreciative person of the arts, with a genuine wish to support artists. Somebody asked just before we went on air, so to speak, about a digital rights toolkit that the Space, Rob's organisation, makes available, and said, well, is it going to be any use to us here in Ireland? And what's useful to know is that, bar Brexit, and we're so sorry to lose you, up until Brexit, certainly, the laws right across the EU relating to copyright and performance rights were all based on EU copyright directives. I think it's likely that the UK will continue to stay in line with that regime, so that broadly speaking, the rights regimes are the same. So those of you who are joining this forum from the UK and from Ireland can rest assured that what Rob and I have to say is probably going to be useful to all of you. There are two basic sets of rights, and even this can be confusing for people, that arise in theatre and performance arts. One is the copyright in your work, which is, so those of you who are lighting designers, sound engineers, stage designers, directors, there is a copyright in your work, and those are the rights that you need to be looking at and concerning yourself with. Those of you who are performers may well, if you've written a play, written a script, developed a piece of work, you'd have copyright in that piece of work, but you have another set of rights as performers. Now, often these rights get conflated, people don't understand the difference. Now, I'm not going to go into that in any great detail. This isn't a training session, just a conversation, but just to let you know that those are the two sets of rights you're looking at. And I see that Peter Power has very correctly identified the answer, along with somebody else, to a question that somebody raised on the chat room there about when you put your work up online, who actually owns the copyright in that work? You always own the copyright, but subject to extremely wide-ranging licenses, that is permissions, that you automatically grant by using the platform to other platform users to access that work, usually confined to within the context of that platform. So taking that work from Twitter, taking it from Facebook, and putting it onto another platform or using it on another website is not within what you give permission for, but it is a very wide-ranging license, but you continue to own the copyright. One of the things that arises, I think, and misunderstandings can arise very easily because people a lot of the time don't understand, and it's not only those of you who are creating work, but also those of you who are producers. You're working with template contracts, maybe contracts that you've used before in another context. And you may actually, if you're the one issuing the contract and asking somebody to sign it, a creative to sign it, you may not actually realize that you're unwittingly asking them to sign away rights that they shouldn't be signing away for example, online use. And I think a lot of the work that needs to be done is about educating and empowering. I mean, those of us who are lawyers, we have spent years, and in my case, more years than vanity will allow me admit, actually working in this area. So you can't be expected to be, why should you have to become experts in another area? But at least some very baseline information can empower you to understand, have greater clarity about, okay, what is my copyright? What are my performers' rights? What rights am I being asked to give in return for the fee that I'm paying here, if it's a question of you contracting with a third-party producer? And I hope that working with Irish Theatre Forum, we'll be able to maybe we might be able to create some materials that would help this. And I'll talk in a few moments, just before I finish up, about some revising the contract, the template contracts the ITI makes available. But what's really important, and this came up, I'm sure you won't mind me name checking you, Peter, one of our panelists today, when we had a conversation the other day among us, Peter pointed out that when he explained to a producer, look, this is my design and you're using it for something else, you're copying it and effectively making money out of it, I should be entitled to a cut. And then when he explained that to the producer said, oh yeah, gosh, we hadn't actually understood what we'd done. I'm not saying all, some producers can be very Machiavellian, but not all. So often the conversation and you having the confidence to have that conversation. I'm a great believer in the idiot question. I happily put up my hand and say, can I ask an idiot question? And more often than not, it will get to the root of the issue, and nobody wants to admit that they don't understand exactly what they're doing. Admit it. Say, look, I just need to understand exactly what you're going to do with this recording of my work. It's very, very important, and that triggers an important conversation. When I was working with RT when the internet started off, and there was a movement by RTE, and it eventually succeeded because broadcasting became synonymous with live streaming, so that it was expected of journalists and other contributors that when they agreed to and accepted a fee for conducting a broadcast, doing a piece of work, that they were also agreeing to having it made available as a live stream online. And there was some push and pull, and this may well happen within theatre as well. I think particularly when producers or theatres want to use your content, recordings of your work for promotional purposes. That's fine if they want to do it, but they need to be clear about it, and your fee needs to be set by reference to that additional use that they're going to make. And what I would love to see is people feeling more confident in having those conversations. As regards royalties, you could look for royalties for everything, but often, particularly for a small production company, there's an awful lot of admin involved in administering royalties down the line. So that may need to be taken into account in your conversation. I think the conversation, I'm looking forward, I'll wrap up now. The conversation we're about to have is one that I'm really looking forward to, because I think it's going to feed into a process that Anna and Irma have asked me to mention, which is a revision and review of the template contracts made available to members by the Irish Theatre Forum. And even the very short discussion that I was present for, or I was present for it for only a short time the other morning among the panelists today, it was exciting and very, very interesting to know what the issues were that were arising for people. And already even in the chat room, I can see those issues arising. That's so important to feed into the process that Irish Theatre Forum is about to undergo. So with that, I'll hand back to, do I hand back to you, Rob, or back to you, Michael? And we'll take it from there.
Or briefly to me, Andrea, thank you for that. And as we say, all of those issues are very pertinent to this conversation, but there is work that will happen in the near future to give us all the means and the agency to negotiate the terms on which we engage with this digital world that's going to be part of our futures. So back to you, Michael, to kick off our panel discussion of this morning's session.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Andrea. So we're trying to get into some of the specifics and opportunities, but before we rush off and start making, let's not pretend that we're not all in the situation we're in, chasing a well-developed international curve and facing the stresses of trying to make inside a crisis. So let's try and start by talking about some of the experiences and viewpoints of Irish artists who've been trying to navigate this challenge over the last 10 months or so, as well as explore some of the serious pitfalls and having to think and do on the hoof. So we're joined now by Hannah Mullan, who is Associate Producer, Early Years Young People at Pacific, Sian Ní Mhuirí, Director and Writer with Superpower, Independent Producer Maura O'Keeffe, who's currently hard at it establishing creative production services, a new independent artist theatre resource sharing support hub, and independent artist Peter Power, who's been striving to work across a wide range of digital forms for years now and continues to challenge status quo thinking on everything. And I'm going to start with you, Hannah. Can you just kick off by sharing something about the essential tenets of the Civic's Ready Steady Show Early Years Artist Commissioning Programme that existed and still exist prior to March 2020, and how they immediately came under challenge when the pandemic broke, because it was just as a new group of artists were coming on board to work on a set of new commissions that this all started?
Yeah, so I'm going to set a bit of context because it's kind of important that you understand where we started from to understand how the journey that we've been on over the last 11 months and where we're at now. So Ready Steady had been in existence for about 5 years at the Civic. It was a small festival for new work for young audiences and predominantly existed as a platform for artists to R&D new work, resulting in scratch and work in progress showings. And it had done quite well. We've had quite a few kind of shows that have been taken up and gone out around the country on tour. But in 2019, 2020, we decided that we kind of wanted to re-examine the format that we were offering in terms of the commissioning process. And also we kind of wanted to re-engage with the artist development side of things a bit. And predominantly that kind of, the main focus for that was this idea of reintegrating the making of work with the local community, and crucially for our audience, which the work is for young audiences and children. So we wanted to get our artists at an R&D stage into learning settings and getting them to kind of begin the genesis of their ideas with the children, and that would be a very collaborative and kind of closely engaged process. We went to open call and we had lots of fantastic conversations and cups of coffee with brilliant artists, and we eventually settled on four groups of artists. Mary Lou McCarthy, who was commissioned to finish work on a fantastic new play called The Dead Letter Office. Katie O'Kelly and Asara Azams, who were commissioned to make a new storytelling piece of theatre exploring the parallels between Irish and Nigerian folklore and myth. Sian and Superpower, who were originally commissioned to create a new piece of work exploring the LAV sign system for early years, an early years audience. And a collective of theatre makers, Martha Knight, Sian Smith, Sophie Coote and Luke Dalton, who were commissioned to make an interactive play station, which must involve some element of live play for the children, which was going to take place in our gallery space at the Civic. Why am I telling you this? Because I want you to understand how truly invested we were in the live experience and performance. And also because I honestly want to communicate to you how at the time, I had very little knowledge about digital work, about how it was made, about who was making it, and on what platforms. And also, you know, in the YPC sector, like we can be sometimes, not always, but sometimes we can be a little purist in terms of our aesthetic. And we hold the live very, very close to our hearts because of our audience and because of the way the children engage with that experience. But so we were sitting there delighted with ourselves, and I think we had literally written the press release when we went into the first lockdown. And I'm not going to lie, Michael and I had a few extremely intensive conversations about how to proceed, you know, whether we should pull the program, whether we should like drastically rethink what we were going to do, whether we should put it on pause. And I kind of spent the weekend howling at the moon and going, this was not the work I thought we were going to make. But then gradually over that space and thinking about the conversation, Michael, three things changed for me. And the first thing was that I kept turning over and over in my mind was that we're so lucky. Ready Steady was essentially an R&D space. It's a space to take risk. It's a space to try new things and to be brave. And that was kind of the space that we were trying to eke out through the redevelopment phase that we'd gone through already. And the second thing was, as part of that, I really wanted, as part of that kind of space of R&D, research and development, I had wanted to create a space which I called the outside eye, which was going to be to bring someone into the room. All the commissionees were going to come into a room. We'd spend a day workshopping with someone who didn't work in the arts. And I wasn't quite sure what that person was going to be. They were going to be like a scientist or someone involved in systems management. But virtual reality had come up as a possibility, something that would stretch our makers thinking about the work and about their process and about what was possible. And the other thing that kind of happened was my 4-year-old came home with homework on Seesaw. And for those of you who don't have little people, Seesaw is a platform that they get their homework on. And I was suddenly confronted with the very real thing that my children are living in a digital world and they are digital beings, and this thing is here. And you know what? I kind of realized that it has been here for the last 15 years. It's been sitting on our shoulder, kind of quietly saying, we're here, this platform exists. And that really kind of made me recalibrate a little bit, because particularly for our audience, young people and children, you know, like we have a responsibility to be relevant and to explore and engage with the world as it is, you know, irrespective of politics of screen time and all of that stuff. You know, that thing about theatre holding up a mirror to the world as it exists, that's real, that's really important. And it's really important that we don't kind of shy away from this discussion about the digital world and about technology as well. And so I began to get really excited. And I kind of was thinking about it, and actually, you know what? What's happened here is we have discovered as makers, you know, that there is a secret drawer in our palette of tools and colours and aesthetics that we can now draw on, that we didn't know existed, to make really beautiful, exciting, creative new work for children and young people. And that began to kind of get me quite excited. So we went back and to the drawing board, and the first thing we did, which was really important, was we took away all deadlines. We just removed that as a thing, which, given what happened subsequently with various lockdowns and things, and the way the making process has been kind of interrupted, worked out very well for us in the long term. But crucially, what it did was it relieved everyone's need to output straight away. And it gave us space to have some serious conversations about work and about thinking in a strategic manner about the placement of work and what that meant, and all of the things that we've been discussing, you know, today. And that was very, very important. We sort of, the way we dipped our toe in was we put together a program of Go See. So as a group, we went to see a lot of work, a lot of digital work. We saw live stream stuff, we saw captured stuff, we saw Zoom theatre, we saw work that was downloaded, could only be listened to with binaural headsets, podcasts. We tried to engage with loads of different types of work because, you know, we were developing palette, we were developing taste, you know, and then crucially we took the material that we'd seen and we took it into the room and we pulled it apart and we dissected and critically analyzed. We did lots of critical analysis. We, you know, this bit we liked, this bit we didn't, that bit lost us, you know, and that was really, really important because it kind of gave us a sense of agency about the type of work that we were then going to make. The other thing that we did, which was really important, was we started to reach out to artists who were already making this work. I mean, you know, as we said, this area has been around for the last 15 years, you know, more, you know, and there are really great examples of people who have been engaging. And we had one particularly brilliant conversation with an artist called Greg Sinclair, who was commissioned by Imaginate in Scotland to make a project called Live Score. And as part of that, he did a live performance in Edinburgh with children who were out on the islands on the west coast in Scotland, and children who were working and making in Ghent. And I think that what that did was it kind of took out the franticness of the period of history, if you like, that we were living through, because you kind of realized that actually there is space for pause and space for thinking. And, you know, this work has been being developed for so long. The technology has been being developed for so long. It kind of made everybody feel a bit less kind of anxious about output, which I think was hugely important. The other thing we did was we tried to think carefully about how we needed to resource. So we brought in a digital production manager, the wonderful Aina Whelan, who could answer all the silly questions, because we discovered very quickly that our artists had, you know, lots of ideas, but actually kind of translating that into how to make these types of engagement, you know, that there was the need for extra support there. And then the fourth and kind of most important thing we did was we spent a day, we had one day in between the lockdowns where we all got into a room together. And this I think is the only time we've all been in a room in the last 11 months all together. And we spent a day with a lady called Camille Donegan, who is a fascinating woman. She comes from a background, she's trained as an actor, she works in theatre, but then she fell in love with XR and all things virtual reality and augmented reality. And she took us into the Civic for a day and literally blew our heads off in terms of what was possible. And what that did was it created a really interesting moment where everybody was playing, and we did what did we do that day? We did games. We played virtual reality games. We looked at video with live and virtual reality experiences which were happening at the same time, and she really kind of just opened our minds. And what was really interesting was that all of a sudden what started to happen was the artists started to contribute and get involved and say, so if that's possible, is this possible? And you could see the kind of the minds of the kind of the coders and Camille kind of filtering through and going, well, no, that couldn't happen. This might be able to be possible at the moment. That could happen, but maybe in a couple of years' time. And we suddenly had this space where real creative thinking was happening. And that was incredible, you know, in the space of 8 hours to have that kind of exchange was really, really exciting. And I think that for us as a sector, and specifically YPCE, there is something really exciting about the potential here for really to unpack and investigate immersive experience. And that space between gaming, play, and the live there's something there that really could be new and innovative, and it's not going to replace theatre. It's a completely new space, but how exciting, you know? One thing that I will say before I know that Sian is going to talk about this in a little bit more detail is what we've ended up with some really exciting work, which we hope to get out in June, or certainly over the summer. But what we have resulted in is nowhere relatable to the work we originally commissioned. And I suppose that's it's really important to say that like, you know, we said no to a lot of things as part of this journey. As much as we said yes to, we've said no to. So I hope that might be a little intro to kind of our journey and experience with it.
Thank you, Hannah. And Sian, so you were part of that yes-no process, because we originally started with one plan and then suddenly we had to find another. Do you want to talk about that for you and the meaning system, about how making those choices about what is and isn't to you as an artist inappropriate, you know, saying it's inappropriate or you don't want to do this on this project, but there's something else that I do want to do that is appropriate, and how important that is to kickstarting this sort of a discussion?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of the really interesting things, especially about this panel today, in terms of, you know, who's speaking, if myself and Peter are two artists reflecting, I think we're a good representation of myself being an artist who didn't really work digitally before the pandemic, and Peter being someone who did, and so is very knowledgeable about that. So just, I suppose, to put out there context for people listening, my reflections, which I'll keep brief because I think that Peter has loads of really interesting stuff to say, which will bounce off this, but my experience of this will be, I suppose, most relevant or useful to someone similar who really just made live theatre and didn't make a huge amount of digital content before now. So the piece that we'd applied to Ready Steady Show with was a piece that involved signing. And it was something that we were interested in doing with a performer, a Down syndrome performer, who we were working with a company to try and work with basically communities early years communities and also communities that are neurodiverse or that have other health needs that could use the law of sign system. And basically very early on, it became obvious to us, like from a superpower point of view, a lot of the work we develop with communities. And we develop through knowing those communities, through long-term interactions with those communities, through personal work and relationship development. And I suppose the first thing that came to mind for me in this experience was I developed a really strong feeling towards the sort of work that I didn't want to do, because it were like some relationship building that requires vulnerability, that requires a certain type of experience to get to know a person, a certain type of connection with an audience. I didn't feel qualified to explore digitally because I was exploring that whole new form myself. So I didn't necessarily want to explore new access needs, new forms, and a new subject at the same time. So we kind of, myself and Heather as the superpower producer, and Mark as well, but I think Heather really was, from a producing point of view, was instrumental in helping us pick and counter offer something that we were interested in. And it was great that the Civic responded so well. I think thinking about digital stuff themselves, when we said, look, a lot of our projects are not suitable for developing digitally because of the form that we have tried to explore them in, we have an idea for something that interests us. So I think the three things for me that we focused on were a thematic benefit to going online. Only you can ask yourself if your work would have that. You know, you don't want to make a poor man's version of the play that was made to be live. So is there a thematic and an artistic benefit to that? And for us, is there an access benefit? Which for our piece, which I'll very briefly explain in a second because it's super complicated. We're R&Ding it. It's someone should have maybe told me not to throw so much at the wall, but I did. So I'll give a brief introduction to what it is in a sec. But there is a large international aspect of access to our work. If we put it online, it would have a reach to communities that we're working with that we wouldn't have had live ever, right? And then I suppose the piece asks a question about form. So there was a curiosity around form in the work there. So in brief, Knapsack is a project that looks at, we're working with the Kurdish community in Ireland and an arts organization called Nergez. It explores a story about children who are living on their own. And it's based on a very ancient myth. There's versions of it all over the kind of Middle East and basically former Mesopotamia. But it's a particularly important Kurdish myth and Kurdish founding myth. And it's the story of their New Year's, Nowruz. But as part of it, it involves a story of a bunch of children who are exiled to a mountain because their leader is eating their brains. It's a whole bunch of child sacrifice going on. They exile the children who have to live and take refuge on a mountain and survive on their own. And the piece was exploring value, violence, and preparedness for survival, as well as preparedness for revolution. What do children pack in their bag to go on a journey or to live on their own and to prepare for the world that's coming? And there is, in my mind, this interesting mathematical undercurrent, because the question, what is the perfect bag to pack for a journey, does actually have an answer. And there is an optimization problem called the knapsack problem, which is an algorithm as well, very important to coding and to cryptography, that basically means if you can give discrete values to discrete objects and you have a set space, you can figure out what is the most value you can fit in that bag. So we were looking at this story that was child focused, based on the mountain, that we wanted to put online in an immersive way, that explored packing, where kids could play along at home, could pack their own bags, that it was quite intimate, and that from my point of view, I suppose, as Hannah had said, we watched a lot of online content as part of Ready Steady Show. I'll be honest that I didn't like a lot of it. I have not responded well to digital content in the pandemic. I don't think a lot of digital content is for me. Digital theatre content is for me. If I wanted to do digital things, I'd do a lot of the digital things that were happening before the pandemic, which are far more developed for people who know what they're doing. myself included, like Knapsack and what we've done so far could be a big failure. We don't know. You know, we've recorded a lot of footage that we're editing at the moment with Fatima Halawa, who's a filmmaker we work with. But I suppose for us, we identified what we miss about theatre and what we're curious to see if we can put on into our digital work. And for me, that was risk, complicity, intimacy, and spectacle being very important. So a lot of what we explored was seeing if we could get those elements into a digital piece, and also embed that in a platform, maybe a specific platform that had other learning resources and other links to Kurdish culture in Ireland, Kurdish events in Ireland, to more STEAM content, because we do a lot of sort of science stuff in Superpower. I suppose the last thing I'll say, just to springboard onto the next speaker, is one of, you know, if the title of this kind of forum is about making digital work with limited resources, I have to, I suppose, put out our stall and say we didn't have the biggest limit that theatre makers always have, which is money. We had been funded to do a big co-production this last year through an arts grant that we couldn't do because it was with a company in New Zealand, and New Zealand's shut forever now. So we were able to divert some funding towards this. We didn't have a limit of space because we were working with the civics. We had a venue available and we had our own funding to bring to the table. The power dynamics that existed before this pandemic in theatre still exist, and they are our biggest problem. Lack of money, lack of perhaps bravery in taking risks. Power dynamics is a huge thing that's going to come up with these conversations with producers, contracts, rights, respect. Our industry has big problems with those and the power dynamics between artists and venues. I think that there was a feeling at the start of the pandemic that there was a utopian chance for us to come together. Whereas a lot of my experience has been that organizations at a time of great stress like this haven't managed to change for hugely for the better, because why would they? We're all people, you know. It's a pressure cooker right now. So maybe venues that had problems, or organizations or funders that had a certain problem with vision before the pandemic, I don't know why we expect them suddenly to have this huge awakening of vision now. And that also applies to artists. So the limited resource, and I think Peter will probably talk about this with great skill, because, you know, he's such an amazing practitioner in this regard and such a bank of knowledge, is what we have to admit as an artist, myself, the lack of knowledge that we had was about the new forms we were stepping into, the politics and ethics of digital work, what exists already. Like, I feel like even say if you take improvisational theatre pre the pandemic, I feel like there's a group of students that go away every year inspired by improv and basically try and reinvent Dungeons and Dragons. Do you know what I mean? They come back and they're like, live storytelling, we can do, and it's a real crap version of Dungeons and Dragons, because they don't realize they don't have the monopoly on improvisational storytelling. So we are really trying to make sure that we're asking the questions of, we're not expecting ourselves to invent something new, because we are really novices in this area. And instead we're asking, how do we transform this discrete idea we have, as we always would as theatre makers, in the full context of where it sits for audiences and politically and monetarily? How do we take that and put it into a digital space? And admitting that we all have a lot of learning to do in that regard, and also some improvement on our basic structures as they existed before we even tried to make digital work. So zip, shin and will for now. Sorry for going off.
Brilliant, Sian, thank you. Maura and Peter, I assume you're there. Maura, I know you rightfully, as a lifetime theatre maker and mentor, are really keen to stand and say why. Do you want to raise some of those thoughts at this moment?
Yeah, sorry, I've just been kind of completely immersed in listening to you both talk about work that you made. I'm kind of one of those people who spent all of last year unmaking and unproducing and just spending, you know, months of knee jerk trying to figure out how to get to the end of the next week. So it's been really inspiring to listen to both of you, Hannah and Sian, just talking now. Anyway, yes, I am a lifetime producer of live theatre and live performing arts, and continuing to be so. I'm also very much in the analog world, and trying as an independent producer, working with a wide range of artists across sort of digital and analog forms, just trying to find new ways of helping. So just recently I've set up, as Michael said, this new producing hub as such. It's not a building-based organization. It's myself and Sarah Cregan, producer, joining forces with two production managers, Rob Fury and Pete Jordan, and marketing consultant Annette Nugent. And we're just trying to really consolidate our expertise and knowledge, and sort of roll up our sleeves together and see what we can do to help artists make work. And one of the key things for me, not pre-pandemic, but because of the pandemic, I felt I just needed to really sort of nail my colours to the digital mast in whatever way I could. So I've been a little scattergun in my sort of, oh my God, what am I going to do? But one of the things I'm really desperate to do in the coming years is to sort of stop and think, and, you know, realizing I don't even know what the questions are, not to mind the answers. And so partnering with the space and with Michael in this project Pretty, and I'm hoping over the coming year we will be able to invest in research and development and basically improve conditions, improve sort of platforms for artists to make work. I mean, I've been listening a lot also this morning to the idea of, you know, audiences and what's important for audiences. And yes, absolutely, we all make work for audiences. But I also spend a huge amount of my time with artists talking about the work and what serves the work, what serves the artist, and questions like what it's like for actors to perform live in a live stream versus a broadcast versus, you know, sort of live on stage with people in the audience. And so they're the kind of things that are preoccupying me as well, is how artists, how make the kind of work that I've been making, which is more kind of straightforward plays, how we might make that sort of the context better for those kind of artists at the moment, while we wait for audiences to be allowed back into that space. And so one of the things I've been trying to do is put some research and investment into capture, which I think it's very kind of boring. It's a boring place to be in some ways, because it is sometimes about money and resources, but it's also about, I'm trying to sort of be as creative as I can and look at kind of new ways of capturing in an affordable way for artists. I've also been looking with Kirkadurka with just trying to make, you know, a new platform for artists to promote their work. We did a project in November called Show Online. It was traditionally a work in progress festival that Kirkadurka ran. We moved it all online and put as much resource, money, people, time as we could into a platform, really simple online platform, where artists could make little promo pieces, and we would kind of bring them all together collectively. And we continue to work on then promoting the work, trying to get presenters nationally, internationally to look at the presentations. And there's a group of them on there. We're going to build on that over the next 6 months. So yeah, I guess, you know, where I'm at the moment is I'm at my big kind of questioning phase, and looking for the questions and looking for ideas and looking for ways of helping. And actually this morning's been really amazing, because I kind of realized, okay, I've got to go and help make us all more aware of contracts, try and kind of, people have been asking in the chat about maybe we would do more kind of group conversations about that. Sarah, who's my new partner, is also on the board of Theatre Forum, and she's very involved in the forthcoming revising of contracts. So think that's something Sarah and I'll be really putting our time and energy into. I listened to Neil's idea this morning about let's pool resources and maybe find a way of paying a company who might film other people's work. And so I'll be calling him going, actually, could we talk about that? And maybe look at trying to actually do that. Maybe look at with the Arts Council and see if there's a way, rather than 75 of us applying for capacity building to buy cameras, maybe we could just look at having a centralized resource. The other thing that I'm really looking at as well is time. You know, we all have really short deadlines, and I know the Arts Council have just published their year of deadlines for the first time, which is kind of so fantastic in some ways. I mean, we're all so grateful, but it's something we really, really, really do need to advocate more strongly for. Listening to Sian and Hannah there, I mean, the joy and the beauty of the time that you've had is amazing. I've been working with Gareth and Lazar for 25 years on, Beckett prose works, and we take a lot of time all the time. Connor and Judy spend years working on text and pieces, and it shows in the work. It's hard to take it. You really have to sacrifice so much. And they recently did a digital preview of the last piece of How It Is, the Beckett novel that we're going to stage later in the year, and just literally sort of to kind of perform a really short excerpt of live work of very, very simple. The amount of time and energy and effort they put into it was remarkable, but it was needed. I think and that's not something we often have in our independent project grant driven world that we all live in. We're not buildings, we're not organizations like the Abbey or Druid, and so yeah, I think the Arts Council, I think one of the things I'll be really trying to do with the Arts Council is finding ways to give artists more time. Anyway, sorry, that's me for now.
Peter, questions that are not in the room. I mean, there are so many assumptions that we're in danger of making by not even knowing what we should be assuming, and yet assuming we know them or we need to know them. And I know that you've obviously been fighting not a lone battle, but a really complex, multidisciplinary life, and also looking way outside the box. What, in particular, things like the huge perils around contracts and what's happened to the music industry and the impact potentially of gaming. Do you want to kick off?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I mean, you'll forgive me if what I say, what follows, is a bit unstructured. I feel like all I can really offer is sort of provocations or responses to the kind of things that we're talking about. I'm by no means an oracle of any kind, and I'm certainly only really dipping my toe in primarily digital media the last 3 years, kind of sparked on by a phenomenal mentorship from Joe Mangan. Really, I had messed around with digital media before that, but not exclusively in those circumstances. So, but I think where I can carry in maybe some help is this idea of transdisciplinarity, or this multidisciplinary sort of approach where you find yourself bouncing off walls constantly, sort of these formalized thinking that you're trying to stretch past, and not to disrupt for disruption's sake, but just kind of interested in collaboration as a primary medium of making. I think the questions that seem to have risen up the most often for me are I suppose it's, and I want to preface this by saying everything I say now, I say about myself as much as anyone else. It's not a kind of a judgment call on anyone, but the first period of time I felt before the pandemic, actually, when I was involved in work of this ilk, I found quite a lot of arrogance in the theatre industry, myself included, around what they felt they could bring to digital media. And I want to start by saying that I'm not talking about publishing for the moment, because quite a lot of this conversation has been about digital publishing rather than digital media or digital art. And I think we really need to remember to separate those two things as two different things. Although they are certainly part of a table of hierarchy, they're really separate and really need to be considered as thus. But that sort of arrogance was very much around things like narrative experience, immersion, this sort of idea of understanding story, live experience. And I felt that myself coming into that world, where I am from theatre, I'm from music. And then I kind of started to remember my youth, my misspent youth gaming, and realizing that actually I had incredibly formative experiences as a teenager, gaming and playing things that were from that world that were just as storyful, just as immersive, just as passionately constructed, just as desperate to initiate change as anything else. And I found myself realizing that a lot of the people I was talking to simply weren't aware of that world, or were, you know, on a very basic level, just weren't gaming. And kind of, we were talking about things like VR, we were talking about things like, you know, live experience. And then you would go home and you would put your, you know, you turn your computer on and you'd suddenly be playing these incredible experiences that were like so beautifully written, so beautifully narrated, scored, presented. And I found suddenly I started to jar quite a lot with the conversation that I was hearing. For me, and then the pandemic hit, and suddenly we were all sort of hurled into this world that has been robustly surviving without us for quite some time and doing brilliantly. I would argue it's doing so well now. There's a wonderful theorist I'd encourage you to look up, Matt Dryhurst, who's a kind of a technical philosopher. He mentioned that at the moment, music has lost its position as the pedestal art form for cultural and revolutionary change. Like music historically has always sort of been the greatest vector for, you know, meeting your people, as he calls it, this idea of reaching, you know, your tribe. Music was a great way of doing that, and it caused revolution for a very long time, and has held its kind of platform as the most fundamental art form for that sort of connection. It's lost its place to gaming. Gaming has officially, even what we saw with GameStop last week, and this sort of group event where they've basically taken down the short stock industry. That comes from a gaming culture, and the gaming industry is, as a term, is very loose too. That can go from anything like you could consider TikTok gaming, all the way across to something like platform games, or, you know, shoot 'em ups, or AAAs, or any of that stuff. What I mean by gaming really is online community. I think we need to look past what we talk a lot about is generating community, generating experiences, micro communities in a moment, or macro communities in sort of socially engaged work. And I think that's already in existence. And rather than trying to recreate a lot of those dialogues, we need to start to look outwards and stop looking at ourselves. The buildings that we've been making work in are not going to be able to pivot overnight to try and do what we're talking about, or indeed what they're asking of us. It's simply not possible. We need to share resources. In one level, Maura is correct that we're gonna endanger ourselves to a form of crisis capitalism very soon, where suddenly the only people being paid are going to be video artists, or video capture artists, or people who are editing films of theatre, because they're charging exorbitant kind of corporate rates at the moment. And a few aren't, but there is that kind of culture of people who've bought a lot of equipment and are ready to video us. But I think what we need to do is realize that a lot of this evolution is occurring outside of our industry. I also think it's really important to acknowledge that it's okay to feel buffeted around by this. What we're talking about is basically stepping into bed with possibly the largest capitalist experiment of all time, which is this idea that we are essentially 3 or 4 figurehead publishing companies have robbed everyone of their agency completely, turned an entire world of content and art into nothing more than content, I suppose, not to use that word incorrectly, and are sharing it willy-nilly with no recourse, no consequence, all under a guise of a sort of free space, a sort of frontierism of free communication, which is in fact just corporate language for theft. So I think we're also caught in that sort of space of not really understanding our rights, our positioning. We are terrified about the vulnerability of our work, where it goes, how it's viewed, a lack of control over the audience, which I know we don't like to talk about, but we are selective in our audiences. Part of making work is to select a place to put it. And if it's kicked out into this sort of vast, wild frontier, it can be destroyed, it can be misrepresented. And that's terrifying if you have no experience with that. And most of the organizations we're talking about don't have any experience with that. The internet is a horrible place, as they say quite a lot, you know. Dryhurst also talks about this idea of how independence has won. The idea of independence has formally won. We don't like to actually talk about that, but this sort of century of the self idea, where we were told as individuals, we can go out and stake our claim on the world. In many ways, you could argue the internet is the full proof of that landing. We have some monarchical powers above that sort of gatekeep how we interact with it. but there is an element of us, independence has won. And as he rightly puts, he says, when independence wins, when everyone is given an opportunity, and I speak in generous terms, obviously we have disability things to consider, privileges, wealth, but when everyone is given a sort of equal opportunity, what actually happens is the people that have the most money, the most time, the most opportunity and privilege profit. And that's what we're seeing in the internet now, is that actually the whole industry has been swallowed by people who've had more time to take advantage of those of us providing the actual means for it. And he speaks of a term called interdependence instead, which is actually, if you look at it, about an idea of radical locality in a digital sphere, which is essentially generating community in of itself in digital spheres such that consequence carries. And what I mean by consequence is that on a simple level, like something like attribution carries, credit carries, royalties carry. And that would lead to a subject like something like blockchain, which is like an attempt to do basically that. Now, these things are not my fields of expertise. I'm dipping in and out of them, but these, I would encourage all of us to start to look at these areas, because this is why we're having one of the greatest kind of awakenings of intellectual property conversation, copyright conversation, authorship, accreditation, contract fears, exploitation. I mean, the internet now as it stands is the greatest exploitative medium in the world. It has essentially made an entire industry out of exploiting the content of others, the work of others. Dreher speaks of how DJs in the 80s were initially responsible for buying a record, taking that record to a space and spreading the word, like the gospel of music. But they were the initial act was to purchase the book of the Bible. Now with DJing, you have a situation where these people are still making huge amounts of money DJing, but they don't buy any music. And that's a really, really shorthand example of what's happened in the digital sphere, really. And how what he now describes is, if we're going to do that, we need to move back towards an interdependence upon one another, a recognition of people and the use of their work, so that we are not so protective of what we make, and we might be willing to let it go. Now that's just kind of that stuff. I will say, like, from an arts perspective, I worry a lot about the term engagement. I worry a lot about the term audience in this context. I worry a lot about the almost sometimes the attempt to pretend the algorithm is not controlling how these things work. You can't really trick Facebook or YouTube or Twitter into putting your work up. They are way smarter, way more developed than you are, and they're controlling what is a platform for themselves. There's huge research going into the AI development of their algorithmic engagement platforms. It's beyond us to try and manipulate that. I think you need to accept you're being manipulated by it. And I think I worry about this idea of talking about publishing as something that we can sort of wrangle control of as an individual. I really just don't accept that. I think we are absolutely out of our depth. We're out, and that we may have these platforms available to us, but they're lying to us. They're telling us things like people are watching videos when they're not. They're putting videos that are just follow-ons from our worst selves. We all know what our YouTube recommended looks like. It's for me, for some reason, it's a load of men fighting, workout videos, gaming. And I'm like, I don't watch MMA. What is this? But clearly there's a darker self somewhere in me that's obsessed with these things. It seems to know more about me than I know about myself, which is obviously really unsettling. But to kind of talk about making art in these spaces, I think it's dangerous in the way that art is dangerous and has always been dangerous, which is that we're supposed to push back. Or at very least, try and break these things in order to make art from them rather than with them. And I think that's something to consider, I think, as the organizations around us are gearing up to present work in a way that, I mean, we are going to have to accept that this is how we're going to have to present some theater. And I think that's a positive thing. I'm not in the camp of binary either or one destroying the other, but I equally think we have to ask serious questions about what we're being asked to do. And in fact, what the gatekeepers and policymakers think they're asking us to do, because they're basing a lot of their decision practice on a kind of an understanding of algorithm that I think they're getting from like marketing feedback, PR feedback, even like analytics from the sites that they're on, that actually are just as likely lying to them as they are to us. And I wonder about what direction in which we're making work. And I say that as a person who I'm very lucky to be mentored and I work with Maura O'Keeffe, who has you know, a huge understanding of she says traditional theatre, but she's underselling her ability there. I think what all of this allows us to remember what is precious, and to really, like, we don't have to kind of lose ourselves in the technical zeitgeist of feeling like we have to alter, like, on a kind of chemical level. I really don't think that that's what's being asked of us. I think we need to calm down the crisis a bit and understand that we can take these things in and make work that is as meaningful and powerful, but also just live, if it's just that. And then what I think we have to accept, regardless, is that this world has shoved its way into our world, and it's making us confront a lot of things we took for granted. And I would include power structures in that. I would include gatekeeping in that. I would include presentation, exploitation. A lot of the things that we really don't like to talk about are now suddenly ripped out and kind of strewn in the public sphere. And I mean, the little I could offer about contract law, because I come from music has a long history of being abused by abusers. And so much so now that the music industry has collapsed, really, you know, for want of a better word, it is almost impossible to make a living as a musician now because of what the wolf we've allowed in through the door. I think theatre could be in danger of the same thing. Live events could be in danger of the same thing if we're not careful. And I think that's why right now, organizations like this that are running forums like this, them taking a stand about, you know, equitability in contract, teaching producers and makers what they're signing away or asking for, all those things are going to become possibly the most important dialogues we have. I mean, this is so important. It's happening on a European level, a world level. Copyright is being assaulted again at the moment. I mean, this is huge territory. So all I wanted to say really is I understand why it feels so terrifying. I'm terrified of it as much as anyone else. I don't feel like I have any grander a handle on it than anyone. What I am maybe a slight bit more up for is I'm up for it changing me. And I think we all can just be okay with that, because if my career is worth anything to anyone or what I've gone through, I really mean this when I say I've lost nothing by collaborating across disciplines, ever. There's nothing has ever been lost. I've only ever gained, because when you really reach into another place, you'll find people with the exact same passions as you. All we need right now is to be careful how we do it, and to talk about those protections, and to talk about, because you can go online and find people just as passionate about the structure of gaming and their, you know, 4 descriptions, as Sian so wonderfully put about her work. They have the exact same, you know, the indie gaming market is such a rich, artful place. You know, so I would just encourage you to not fear that collaboration, to not fear that change, because you will get to keep the part of your work that's most precious. And all that will happen is, as my favorite Jean-Luc Picard quote goes, is all the crucible, it'll burn away the irrelevancies. That's all that will happen, is once you put all these things in the crucible of digital media, the irrelevancies will burn away. And so that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. Can I thank everybody who's contributed to this? I mean, I know out of that wonderful conversation has come probably 1,000 questions that we didn't even know we had, and they're going to sit and they're going to be there for a while, but it's only through allowing those questions space and time that I think we will have a chance to come through, as you say, Peter, with that crucible still full, but those things that we thought were important no longer important in the way they were, because the deeper truths that we mustn't let go of have withstood this experience, and we need to make sure we buy ourselves that time to dare to ask, what is it that really is going on here, who we are engaging with, why we're doing this, do I want to do this, and to have the courage to say no. So I'll just hand back to Irma and Anna, and thank everybody here, and thank you, Rob.
Sorry. Peter finished that piece with, that's all I have to say. Unfortunately, for everyone listening, and maybe particularly myself, Peter has so much to say on this topic. I think we'll probably be doing an entire session, if not a week-long session with Peter in the near future, but thank you. And I said the response in the chat has been absolutely extraordinary. In developing the programme for these few days, we're very aware that we as Theatre Forum are in very new territory, and maybe some of what we can offer in the future is to fall in behind what you want to do and how you want to negotiate the terms of engagement for working in the future, and to support that and to provide the resources. But I said this conversation is a starting point, and we would like that conversation to continue, and we will ensure that it does. At this point, there are so many comments in the chat. It's almost it's impossible, but all of the session and indeed the chat will be available for people to view afterwards, and I'm sure there will be more views than just the people here this morning. At this point, we want to allow you to continue conversations. So Samantha here from the space team will allocate all of us to randomly to breakout rooms, so that you can replicate that, you know, bumping into somebody as you leave the auditorium on the way to coffee or lunch. And please feel free to leave if you've got other things to do. But if you want to stay and join those people in that chat room, breakout room, do so, and Samantha will allocate us now for the next little while. After that, you'll be brought back just to this main space, and we'll sign off for the day at that stage. But if we don't see you back after the chat room, look forward to seeing you tomorrow for both of the sessions, and thank you everybody for today.
Enjoy the breakout session.